Hello, Mr. Nick. How are you, sir? Good. How's Mama doing over there?
I'm great.
All right. Well, so tell me what's new, Nick. What you been up to?
Working.
Working. All right. Well, that sounds pretty fun. Hopefully you ain't doing it in the heat out there and getting all heat stroke on us, right? No?
No.
Okay. Well, we're going to get this thing going because I want everybody to get to learn about who this fella is we're talking to. This is Mr. Nick Sandlin, and he's got a pretty cool story that I want everybody to be able to hear and know what he's got going on. So, Mom, could you tell us a little bit about what Nick deals with?
Nick has cerebral palsy, and he also has kidney disease, and he has a severe hearing loss. And because of his cerebral palsy, he's considered nonverbal. So he's got a lot of different things going on.
Now, for a lot of people out there listening, could you give us like a little short definition of what cerebral palsy is?
In short, cerebral palsy is an impaired muscle coordination, and it can be caused by damage to the brain due to a lack of oxygen. And usually it's either before or during birth that it happens. And there's different types of cerebral palsy. And Nick's cerebral palsy is basically called atheroid cerebral palsy, which is uncontrollable movements. You'll see some people with cerebral palsy that's real stiff or real loose. And Nick's kind of a different version of that. He might have a real slow movement with some parts of things, or he may have a real jerking motion, or it also affects like the muscles in your face and your tongue, which of course that goes back to having trouble with his speech. One of the things about atheroid cerebral palsy is you've learned to deal with it one way, but it changes all during the day. In the morning, it might be one way, his muscle tone might be really good, and then the afternoon it might be different. So that's why sometimes his speech is so much better than it is others, because it fluctuates.
Okay. Well, now that's a very good explanation for people out there listening as to what's going on, with Nick medically every day. Can you tell us now, speaking on that medical side of things, can you tell us, I heard a story that you guys had told me once before that about some things some doctors had told you when he was about to be born or after being born.
Well, Nick had a terrible start. I mean, we really were told to cut the machines off and to basically let him go. There was really not much hope for his outlook. He had a lot of other things at that point, such as a hole in his heart that they said would have to be surgically closed. He had bleeding on the brain. I mean, anything you can possibly imagine, he had it. But we were at St. Vincent's Hospital, and to this day, I feel like we had an angel there. That she was a nun that worked in the intensive care unit, and she basically kept talking for us, because my husband and I, we just really couldn't ask questions, couldn't even comprehend, because we never thought anything was going to go wrong, and we were just shocked that it did. And when we met with the doctors, and they had us to just let us ask any questions we had so we could make the decision. She basically asked all the questions, and then we were like, we're not doing this. We're going to kind of let it go. And we did. And Nick ended up zone, and everything that we thought was a problem disappeared. And so from that moment on, we continued to have positive things to come. If Nick laid his head down on when he was a baby, he couldn't pick his head up and turn it. And we were, right after we had met with those doctors that told us to cut the machine off, we came into the intensive care unit to see him, and Nick all of a sudden picked his head up and turned it. And you're talking a baby that's in critical shape. And all of a sudden the tube comes out of his mouth, and the nun just grabbed me and said, just wait. And Nick started breathing on his own. And so from that point on, we knew, it wasn't the doctors that could make these decisions for us. And we were just going to have to take every day, day by day. And that's pretty much what we did.
Wow. Now that is, folks out there listening, that is actually an incredible story to hear a child, that was told a lot of things, or his parents were told that he wasn't going to make it and wasn't going to do a lot of things, and to see that miraculous turnaround. I mean, there's only one way to, and one category to put that in, and that's absolutely amazing that the man upstairs takes care of things that we need him to take care of. Can you give me, and I know you kind of touched on some of that stuff with the medical side, but can you give me a list of things for out there people listening that they said that he, may or may not do as he grew up as well, as far as, maybe going down the sitting, standing road, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, every step of Nick's life, we were told he wouldn't do. As far as crawling, he wasn't crawling, and they said he probably would never be able to crawl. They said he'd never be able to walk. He would never be able to talk. One of the things was he wouldn't be able to be potty trained. And they were telling me this to a child that couldn't even stand up on his own. And I was like, well, how's he going to get to a potty if he can't even stand up by himself? So everything that Nick ever heard them say, he overcome it within days later. One of the examples was potty training. They had a meeting with us, and he was right there in the room telling us that he wouldn't be potty trained. And sure enough, we go home that night, and I put on training pants on him and kind of talked him through what was happening. And the next day, he starts pointing to the potty when he had to go. Of course, he'd have to have assistance to get there, but he didn't have a bit of problems with it. Same thing with walking and all the many other things that he did. And he was very, very involved with United Cerebral Palsy at a very young age. And they had every adaptation you could think of to help us along the way, from weighted cups to weighted spoons to a cardboard box that they created to go into a high chair. And we tried, and we did every one of those things, no matter what. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, we try something different. But we never gave up on what they would tell us to do. And another prime example of that I think you and I talked about in the past was they sent us to a specialist to see if he might need braces or some other kind of anything that they might be missing to help him stand up and to get his balance and coordination a little better on that end. So we waited about 4 hours to see this doctor. And of course, I was about already livid for just waiting that long, but I kept thinking he's a specialist. He must really know his stuff. He's really good. I can't wait to get there. And we get in there to see him, and I tell him what we're there for. And he takes a quarter and throws it down the hallway and sends Nick after it. Well, Nick did. It took him a while to get there, but he got there. And of course, trying to pick that quarter up off the floor was about impossible, but he got it and he came back. And when he got back, the doctor looked at me and said, well, he has cerebral palsy. So what are you expecting? And I could not believe that he said that. And I said, well, what do you mean? What am I expecting? I'm wanting you to give me ideas of what else we might could do. And he said, well, that's just the best it's going to be. And I said, so you're telling me because he has cerebral palsy, we should have never tried a weighted spoon or a special baby bottle or a special insert for a chair. We should just put him in a corner somewhere and say, oh, well, he has CP and this is the way life's going to be. Is that what you're telling me? And basically that was his answer.
Wow. I mean, my takeaway from all that for the parents out there listening is not to, take every word that the doctor says for truth, because there's a lot of things these children are going to overcome on their own and work through things. And then also maybe, in my opinion, even get out there and get a second opinion. Because a lot of times these doctors are seeing so many patients, they look at one cerebral palsy patient and they say, well, the rest of them are going to be exactly the same. And we can't put everybody into the same mold. Now tell me, after discussing this and going through these things with these doctors, when we get into the childhood of Nick and he's a little guy and trying to get going, what were some of the things we were getting into? Was he just like all the other children, or could we get him out there in the sports and the soccers, the basketballs, the baseballs, all that stuff?
There was a lot of challenges, and every single thing that he wanted to do was just like every other kid. And we were able to find ways around it. Like if the other kids were riding scooters, we'd find a 3-wheel scooter instead of a 2-wheel scooter. So all along the way, we were able to adapt things. And then he started in the sports, and he was playing Special Olympics type sports and loved that. Believe it or not, he ran track. And my first meeting with the track coach, I thought I was going to die, because we met at Birmingham Southern, and he was barely walking. And she tells us, okay, well, while me and your mom talk, you run around the track. And I'm like, have you lost your mind? Do you realize he's barely walking? But he did, and he made it, never hesitated. It never slowed him down. And so we ran track with Special Olympics. We traveled to Canada, Kansas, Chicago, everything with Special Olympics doing that. And he loved it. And we also did a special baseball league. But then when his brother came along, his little brother, and he got involved in sports, he was more in the normal sports, of course, the basketball and the soccer and golf. And he wanted to get involved in it too. And so the community just grabbed Nick up and put him right on the regular teams and never looked back. And his brother Mitchell's friends all along the way got just as close to him as they did Mitchell, and would always include them in the games. And there was a time or two that they had little secrets going on with the rivalry team that they were playing, and would get them to stage something so that Nick could get out there and score some goals for them. But he stayed right there with them and never looked back. And then he even took his sports into the high school level, because when he got into high school, he really enjoyed football. And of course, there wasn't a whole lot he could do to be involved in that, but some of the coaches and the players caught wind of it. And so they adopted Nick as a trainer. And so Nick got to participate in high school with the football team, and he went to every football game and was at every practice, and made some great friends by doing that.
Well, and that's pretty neat too. Now, that's going to lead me into my next question that I know a lot of people are interested in hearing, is when he opened these areas up and went into those sports and even went into the school, you already talked about making a lot of great friends. Is there any doors that you feel like he's opened along the way, maybe stuff with testing or being in classes or anything like that?
Yeah, I think in school, he kind of paved the way for a lot of things. And I don't think we did it going into it thinking that. But I think that he really set the motion for a lot of different things. Thinking back into grammar school and stuff, wasn't quite as much. His was, he wanted to be involved more in regular classes. He didn't like just being in the small special ed classes. And so even though he was nonverbal, he would tell you real quick, I'm not stupid. And so he wanted to be in the regular classes. So he worked a lot in regular classes in the younger years, which in the later years too, but that was when it pretty much started, was when he was younger. But an example of what happened later in high school, he was in, they called Hotel Motel. And that was really the only class that they had out there to teach a trade or to be an elective for a kid that was special ed. And Nick was bored to death with it. He said he knew how to make his bed up and clean the house. He didn't want to do that at school, and he sure didn't want to do that for life. He wanted something different. Well, they started a choir program for special needs kids. So I went to register one year, and there was a principal there that was actually doing the registering. And so I told her, I said, well, Nick's done Hotel Motel so many times. What else can he take besides that? And she said, choir. And I just started laughing because I thought she was joking, because I knew she knew Nick. And so she's like, well, it's funny. And I said, well, I thought you were joking. I said, Nick's done Hotel Motel and Nick's nonverbal, so I really don't think he wants choir. And she said, well, that's all that's available for those type people. I said, for those type people, that's all that's available. And she said, yes. And I said, well, that's just not going to work. that's just not acceptable for those type people or any other type people. So we need to go to the starting board here and figure out something else. Well, I asked Nick, I said, what do you want to do? What class in this school building do you want to do? And he immediately told me auto tech. He loved cars. He loved working on things. So why couldn't he be an auto tech? So we set up a meeting and met with the auto tech teacher, and he was awesome and all on board with it. And so Nick was the first student that was special ed to ever be in auto tech. And there's been many to follow now.
That's really cool to know he's out there opening doors like that and giving people the opportunity to look behind, you know, what he's done and be able to say, okay, if Nick can do it, I can do it as well. And now, you know, going along that same type of theme there and trying to understand the doors that he's opened, is there anything along this travel of coming through the school system that you would have done differently? Is there something that you would have, you know, said, hey, boy, I wish we would have thought of that sooner?
I think, I don't know that I would say it's differently. It's more along the lines of how I approach things. One thing that I want everybody to understand, whether they're a parent before they start to school or if they're already got a parent into school, a kid into school, is there's some wonderful teachers out there. Absolutely wonderful staff, teachers, from custodians to all of it. And take that and embrace it, but also remember that you know your child more than anybody else does. And you know the things that they need, whether it be a little bitty thing that they need or whether it be a major thing they need. But that teacher's got 50 other million things going on, and they're not going to pick up on those type things. So it's really, really important for you to remember you've got to stand out and you've got to put your child first and push. If it has to be a fight to get it there, don't sit back and say, well, they'll get to it next year. You've got to fight for it. And sometimes I look back and think, man, I waited 2 years for that and I shouldn't have done it. I should have pushed harder at the beginning. And those are the type things that I think if I had to do it again, I would remember what great teachers they were and embrace that, and then try to help them to see those important things that need to be worked on.
I think that's just absolutely great advice to hear for all the parents out there listening, is not to sit back and think, you know, my child can wait till next year to learn this. No, it's their time to learn it now and make sure that they're put where they want to be. Just like Nick being in that auto tech, it's so wonderful to hear that you went out there and started looking for things that made him happy instead of letting the school, you know, kind of dictate what programs, you know, as you said, for people like him to get in. Because a lot of times we're all put into categories, and none of us in my book are made to fit into a category. We're on our own unique person. So I think you have fun in life and do what makes you happy. And speaking of what makes you happy, tell me some ideas out there. What is Nick's hobbies? What does he love doing?
Nick, you want to tell him that? You want me to do it? All right. He loves hunting and fishing of any sort. And he's a big mud rider. He loves riding ATVs. He loves driving them or riding them. And cars. He loves any type of cars. And he's really involved in going to car shows. And he has a 66 Mustang of his own that he's done a lot too. And he loves taking that to car shows and hanging out with the guys.
Now, wait a minute. A 66 Mustang. How many people do you know has got a 66 Mustang? Now, have you had going to these car shows? Has Nick been fortunate enough to win any medals?
Quite a few. He displays them all in his trunk at all the shows. And we told him this last time, said, then we're going to have to start going to Plan B because the trunk has ran out of room. Oh,
my goodness. So all you people out there listening, it sounds like obviously there's so many things to get into. I mean, even as much as a car show out there, that's amazing. I mean, how does he find the time to work on this car? Does he keep it washed up all the time?
It's a continuous thing. Nick has a running list daily of things that has to be completed, whether it's he needs help to get them complete or not. That doesn't matter. It could be just his list. He never stops. He always has something going on.
Wow. Now, one thing I'm real interested in, I'd love to know, what's Nick's favorite foods? What does he love to eat?
You're not going to tell that either. No. He's just giggling because he thinks you're going to start dying laughing if you didn't already know this.
Uh-oh.
Deer meat, anything deer meat he loves. Swordfish and French fries. Those are his 3 favorite.
Now that is
deer meat 24/7.
That is about as far apart as you can get from an animal running around in the woods to one in the deepest part of the ocean out there swimming around. I guess that Nick is the swordfish, the deer meat of the ocean. Is that what that is?
Yeah. It's the cream of the crop, he says.
He's going to be sitting on top of the world out there eating swordfish. That's going to be. Now, how do you find time to catch his swordfish, Nick?
So he catches it right from the grocery store.
Uh-oh. Okay, now we're getting the real story here. Now, speaking of these fun activities that you're doing, I want to know about your brother there. I heard you say earlier you had a brother that got involved and you played sports and stuff with him, and I want to know about that relationship. How is that? They
are pretty tight. His brother's deployed right now, and he sure ain't happy that he's gone. But they have a lot of activities they do together, and he makes sure that brother has a to-do list a mile long as well as we do. I think his brother likes it when he goes away sometimes so he can get off the hook because it keeps him busy. But
what branch of service are we in?
He's in the Air Force. Mitchell's buddies are just as big a part of Nick's life as they are of his. They all hang out with Nick too.
Well, that's pretty neat to have a family member in your life like that that's willing to get in there and do all the things that you do and enjoy the time together with each other. That's one of the things that I really believe is big and people should know going forward is just the time that you spend with your family, because you can't ever get it back. Once those memories, have passed, you can't get time back. You can go to the store and buy a lot of things, but you can't buy time. So I think the time that Mitchell spends with him is absolutely a wonderful thing. Now, speaking of time, we've got us through the time of Nick growing up, of Nick going to high school, and now we're on the other end of Nick coming out of high school. What is the plan here? I know Nick is working. What are we doing working? I mean, can we give the people out there listening, what kind of work he's into?
Yeah, Nick works at the Civic Center here in the area that we live in, here in Gardendale.
Okay.
He works like setting up events and keeping the center clean and everything organized and supplies going. He started out working at Tri-Green, Don Deere, and that was kind of a mishap because of a tornado hit the building the week he was supposed to start. So he was going to actually get to work on small engines and help with the mechanic, but that all was short-lived because of the construction and the bad things that they were having to go through. So he worked there for a while. And then when that ran out, eventually he went to work at Civic Center. And he's been at the Civic Center now for 6 years.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people in their mind right now is going racing, trying to think, Nick, cerebral palsy, things going on, but he's working. Are there any, when we gets out there in that work world, are there any limitations at that Civic Center he has?
No, there's absolutely not. He does it all. Now, when he first started and some of the things that I heard he was doing, of course, Mom jumps in there and thinks, no, that's just not going to work. But he proved me wrong, and he did it from trying to mop to actually using one of the machines to clean the floor. I was thinking this is like putting a bull in a china factory. If he has one of those jerking movements at the wrong time, what glass window are we going through? But he's kind of made a fool out of me and said, I got this. And he's handled it without me getting involved at all.
Well, tell me this. Now, I know we got a lot of families out there listening and obviously other kids listening as well, but the moms and dads that are listening are going through some of the things you're going through. what helped you? Did Nick just go out there on his own and get that job, or what helped you find or go out there and look for jobs for Nick?
Well, actually, it started in high school. And again, going back to some of those teachers are absolutely wonderful, and they see things that you never see. One of the teachers back almost in the 10th grade, I remember when she first started pushing me to try to get him involved in vocational rehab. And at that time, it was still child resource services, to get him involved in what was going to happen after school, And I was like, well, after school, he'll just be at home and we'll just have to plan on that when it happens, and I just couldn't foresee what she was talking about. And I felt like, oh, it's going to be so much easier once he gets out of school, Well, the more I listened to her, the more I listened to Nick about, I got to have a job, I got to get money, I got to be on my own, the more I realized, you better pick up slack here and figure this out. And so that's when I reached out to vocational rehab. And there's lots of different organizations. Cerebral Palsy again has one, which United Cerebral Palsy, I keep referring to that but the name has changed for people that don't know. That's United Ability now, but still same wonderful place. Vocational rehab actually tested Nick and found out what he would be good at and what his interests were. And then once we sat down and kind of navigated the waters and talked about what we wanted and what he wanted to do and what they thought we could, they went out on a search looking for a job. And they're the ones that found both places. And there was actually a little confusion, though, at one point with the Civic Center. We thought that they didn't have a job for him because vocational rehab will pay for the student to work until a certain point. And then once they feel like they're established in that job, they offer that employee to that place, such as Gardendale, and said, are you ready to hire him as a regular employee? If not, we're going to try to locate him in a different position. Well, somehow the wires got crossed and we thought that they didn't want him anymore. And Nick thought they were letting him go. Well, we, made comments, and the Civic Center found out about it, and they called wanting to know who fired Nick. Who told Nick he's fired? Why does Nick think he's fired? What's going on? And we were like, well, we were thinking the time ran out and y'all weren't going to rehire him is all. And they were like, no, that's not the plan at all. We want Nick. We're hiring Nick. So Nick had to go from city council and be elected in to be a new employee. So he is official employee of the city of Gardendale, not the vocational rehab anymore.
Wow. Well, that's a pretty good success story in itself. So if people are out there listening for different ways to get your child involved, there are this voc rehab they're talking about, and I'm sure there's also some other city and state agencies out there that are willing to help these kids get located into programs. So there are jobs out there available if you're looking for something like that. Tell us now that we've heard a lot about Nick and a lot about different things going on in his life. Give us something real funny about Nick. Everybody wants to know. We know the good information. I want to know the funny stuff that nobody else knows.
Well, I have two funny stories that I want to tell you. They're really not related to either one of them, but they're just two funny things that I think understanding how Nick is just are really comical. As I told y'all, Nick always has something to do. He always has a list a mile long of things that he wants to accomplish, regardless of whose other schedule it affects or whatever. He's going to get it done in one way or another. Well, he had been preaching to me for a while that our basement needed to be cleaned out. And mind you, that's where his car is kept. So everything has to be so in that basement. So I had a terrible day at work, and it was just, I was wore out, couldn't wait to get home. And it talked about when I get home, I'm going to sit in a dark room. I don't want nobody to call my name. So when I drive up in the driveway, Nick's laughing because he knows what the story is I'm telling. Somehow, this 130-pound person had taken every single thing out of the garage and had it in the driveway, including a loaded deep freeze.
Oh my goodness. Nick, how in the world?
And I couldn't say anything. I just dropped my head. It was like, oh, Lord, help me. I knew I had to get it all put back in. But he was determined that garage was getting cleaned out.
Wow.
So that was one of his funnies. And then the other funny relates to how he hangs out with all of his brother's friends and how his lack of communication can get him well known all the way back to the Air Force Base. One of Mitchell's friends is from Clearwater, Florida. And when he moved or was here and actually got to know Nick and was getting to be really good friends with Mitchell, they were doing a lot of work at our land that we bought, and they've actually was deer hunting, and then they had killed a deer, and so they were cleaning the deer. So there was a lot of different things going on, and Q had never actually been around any of that type of stuff. He had lived in Clearwater, Florida, but never ever been hunting before in his life. So he would ask Mitchell questions, and Mitchell didn't even know the answer. Mitchell would turn around and ask Nick, well, Nick, what do you do about that? Or what happened? Or how do you handle that? And Nick would always answer. And so Nick started calling Q instead of by his name, which is really one, but it's what? Calling him City Boy. Okay. And so this name hooked to Q that he was now called City Boy. Well, time went by and they started going to the land and started hanging out with Nick in his hunting house that's like a condo. And he has to have a heater in there. And then in the summer, when he wants to sit out there, he has to have an air conditioner. And he has to have matching camouflage clothes, and he can't get his clothes dirty. Everybody else can clean the deer, but Nick can't get dirty. So then they started calling Nick, are you sure you're a country boy? You might be the city boy. So it got to be a big joke with who is the city boy and who's the country boy. Well, then they had a sticker made for Q that says in camouflage, city boy. And they put it on his locker at work. And so now at the Air Force, everybody calls Q City Boy because Nick labeled him as City Boy.
Well, ain't that pretty neat, Nick? Well, we're gonna wrap you up since we've had you so long and holding you up today, Mr. Nick. I thank you very much for coming and being part of this. But Mama, I want to know before we go, and I'm gonna answer our signature question I do on every podcast. Is when we get the chance to read the book, The Life of Nick, tell me what you hope people read in that.
Well, I know they're going to know that he's a loving and a caring person, and all that just shines out of him when you look at him and see the smile on his face. It just makes everybody light up. But I hope that they will see just how God used him to teach others not to give up, and how he motivated so many other people. So many times, things are bad and you say, well, why did this happen? Or God, why does he have to struggle all the time? And he always comes out with a smile, and he always comes out with a way of showing I can do it and we can overcome it some way or another. And I hope that people really can remember that and really see how he motivated others.
Wow. That's pretty powerful words there, Nick. That's a great story that he's got, and I can't wait to hear the rest of it that's going to go on the rest of his life and the walls he's knocking down as he gets older, because I know Mama's also spent time to build a house that she's going to one day leave for him that's going to be all set up for him to live and do his own thing, and got his own job going. So it just sounds like a story to be continued another day. Would you be happy to come on again another day, Mr. Nick?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on today, Mr. Nick and Mom. Thank you very much, and I appreciate y'all's time.
All right. Thank you.